Hello, today I'll be doing a versus video. This time we'll be comparing two albums from two major names in the world of thrash metal, but this time we'll be entering the 90s. But the albums we will be talking about are Sound of White Noise by Anthrax and I Hear Black by Overkill. So yeah, both albums came out in the year 1993. Grunge was big around this time, and you can definitely notice some changes going on with these bands around this time. But let's first talk about Sound of White Noise. So yeah, their first album with John Bush, and also it was produced by Dave Jordan, who I believed, if I remember correctly, worked with Alice in Chains, another great band, of course one of the big names in the world of grunge. But yeah, something you notice with this album is that it does continue the more darker direction that you first heard with, of course, the previous album, Persistence of Time. This album pretty much continues that darker sound. But yeah, another thing you notice with this album is that you can make the argument that it's maybe not as thrashy as the albums that came before it too. But yeah, also again, first album with John Bush, and John Bush is definitely a very different vocalist from Joey Belladonna. Now, of course, you're gonna have your different camps in terms of the type of Anthrax fans that are out there. You have your Joey fans, your Bush fans. You have your fans like me that like both. But for me, I think this is easily the best album from the John Bush era. When it comes to the John Bush era, though, I like some of the era, but not all of it, though. I think this is a pretty good album. I also think We've Come For You All is also solid. But I think the two albums between those albums are not that great. Those albums, of course, being Stomp 442 and Volume 8. Volume 8 to be being their worst album. But both of those albums do have a few decent tracks on them. Like with Stomp 442, I like Random Acts of Senseless Violence and Fueled and Nothing. And then with Volume 8, I like Crush, Inside Out, and Catharsis. But still, I think those two albums are easily the band's weakest. But back to Sound of White Noise. I think this is a pretty strong start to that new era of the band at the time. And I do like John Bush's vocals. Definitely a unique vocalist, I'd say, when it comes to this type of metal, I'd say, or thrash, however you want to put it. But either way, I do like John Bush's vocals, though. Only is, of course, the big song off of here, and definitely one of the highlights on the album, I'd say, and definitely a good choice for a single. Room for One More is another fan favorite off of here. That's another one of my favorites. I really like High Pro Glow, especially the riffs in that song. Potter's Field, that's pretty good album opener. Maybe my favorite album opener from this era of the band, or at least when it comes to the 90s and on. I think this is maybe one of my favorite album openers from the band. But again, there's definitely plenty of competition, though. I mean, Anthrax has definitely their fair share of great album openers, and Potter's Field is definitely one of them. Kind of an underrated song, but I personally really dig it. Definitely one of my favorites on the album. You move towards the second half where you get the more deeper cuts. I really dig track number 9, Sodium Pentanol, if I got the title right. That one, and Burst. Burst is definitely a banger. And then you have a more different sounding song for the band, that song being Black Lodge, which leans more closer to being more of a ballad, or maybe being more alternative, however you want to put it. I'm not sure what the consensus is on how Anthrax fans overall feel about that song, but for me, I like the song. It's not one of my favorites on the album, but I do like Black Lodge, though. 1,000 Points of Hate, I think, is another pretty good banger off the album. But yeah, being more of a different album for Anthrax, I think this album is actually pretty good. Is it top shelf Anthrax? That I'm not quite sure. I'm not sure if I'd quite go that far, but either way, I still think this is another pretty good Anthrax album. But let's go ahead and talk about I Hear Black by Overkill. So with this album, I've seen somewhat mixed opinions on this one. Some people, I've seen a fair share of fans for this album, but I've seen some people kind of crap on the direction that they went on this album, because this album leans more towards groove rather than thrash. But personally, I don't mind the groove in this album, and of course, groove metal was definitely a bigger thing at the time, especially thanks to bands like Pantera and Prong and so on. But I think this album's kind of underrated. I think this is one of their more underrated albums. I mean, for some people, this is maybe one of their weakest. Personally, I disagree with that. I think they would do even worse after this. Mainly the 2000s. I feel like the 2000s were kind of lackluster for Overkill. Of course, there are moments, of course, in terms of songs, but I feel like their 2000s output is, for me, their weakest material. But I think their 90s stuff has some pretty good stuff, though. Horoscope, of course, being my favorite of their 90s albums. But I Hear Black, to me, actually a solid album. Spiritual Void probably being the biggest song on here, and also was a single. I dig the groove in that song. Some of the riffs in that song definitely remind me of Sabbath, which is definitely cool. I mean, Black Sabbath, definitely a really great band, definitely a legendary band. But yeah, I would say that the first half is the stronger half. I feel like the second half is not as strong, not as memorable, but the second half does have its moments, though, like Weight of the World and Undying. Weight of the World is probably being one of the heaviest songs on here. I also like Feed My Head. The riffs in that song kind of give me Black Album vibes a little bit in terms of the riffs specifically. I'm not sure how to get more specific than that, but again, the riffs in that song kind of remind me of Black Album a little bit. No song in particular, but Feed My Head either way. Pretty cool song. And then World of Hurt, I really dig that song. That's a song that's grown to be one of my favorites on the album. I also dig the title track on this album. That's probably another one of my favorites on the album. And then you have Dreamin' Colombian. That's probably another one of the heaviest songs on here. But yeah, I really dig. I actually dig this album. Now, is it top shelf Overkill? Absolutely not. But I still think this is a pretty solid album for Overkill. Now, you have your songs that lean more towards groove, like I Hear Black and Spiritual Void, but you do have there's songs that lean more closer to their older stuff, or lean more towards their more faster side or more thrashy side. Those songs mainly being Dreamin' in Colombian and Weight of the World. But yeah, I think this is a pretty solid Overkill album. If you haven't heard this album in a while, definitely give it another shot, or if you're not a fan of it and haven't heard it in a while, definitely give it another chance, I'd say. But yeah, personally, I dig these albums. Now, of these two albums, which album do I think is better? I'm probably gonna have to go with Sound of White Noise. When it comes to a front-to-back album list, and I feel like this is overall a stronger album. With that said, I do think I Hear Black is a solid album, but I think this is a pretty easy one for me. It's gotta be Sound of White Noise. But let me know your thoughts. Let me know which album you like more in the comment section below. Let me know some of your favorite or least favorite songs off of these albums and all the good stuff. But anyways, thanks for watching. Please leave a comment and a like, subscribe. Have a nice day, and take care.